There comes a moment that everyone who is on the path toward becoming the strongest version of themselves must pass through. The moment you realize that most of what you have been calling yourself is nothing more than layers of social dust placed upon you since childhood. Your ambition was adjusted to fit the mold. Your strength was labeled dangerous. Your will was interpreted as selfish. And then one day, very quietly, you look at yourself and ask, if I strip all of those layers away, what remains? A human being or a domesticated product? You may call that feeling disorientation, but Nietzsche would say, that is the beginning of ascent, the moment when an old value system collapses so that a space can appear where a new being is about to be born. And that is why you should stay. This video is not meant to teach you how to live gently or how to be more easily accepted. It opens an inner evolutionary path where the illusions that once covered you begin to break apart, where you gradually recognize the shape of the person you could become and step by step reclaim sovereignty over yourself. Do not miss any part. Because if you misunderstand Nietzsche, you will turn freedom into chaos. But if you understand him correctly, you will know exactly how to become superhuman in the sense he defined. A human being who no longer lives according to what they were taught, but according to what they choose. Number 1. Shattering the illusion. You are not weak. You were raised to be weak. You were taught to be weak before you even learned how to read. This is the first thing Nietzsche wants you to face directly. Not so that you pity yourself, but so that you awaken from the greatest illusion of your life. You are not weak because you were born weak. You are weak because an entire system wants you to believe that you are. A society that operates on obedience cannot tolerate an individual with their own will, so it domesticates you early. It calls obedience good, ambition dangerous, difference deviant, and superiority arrogant. From the moment you were learning how to tie your shoes, a story was planted in your mind, what Nietzsche chillingly called slave morality, a system that makes you cut off your own strength before it ever has the chance to awaken. He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. You are not weak. You are living inside a story designed to make you believe you are. Think back to your early years. You wanted more. You were told you were greedy. You spoke differently. You were corrected for being rude. You excelled. You were asked to pretend humility so others would not feel uncomfortable. You wanted recognition. You were immediately labeled lacking modesty. You sought challenge. You were warned that failure would humiliate you. And slowly, piece by piece, you learned a cruel lesson. Shrinking yourself is safer. Nietzsche would say, no, you did not learn weakness. You were trained into it. This is why he was furious with traditional morality, not because it is wrong, but because it serves the crowd, not the ascent of the individual. The crowd cannot tolerate those who are too strong, too free, too unpredictable. A powerful individual is a threat to order. Someone who dares to think differently disrupts the model. Someone who dares to resist awakens those who are still asleep. And so slave morality wraps natural human strength in phrases that sound gentle but function as chains. Don't draw attention. Be moderate. Don't rise too fast. Don't be too ambitious. When you hear those messages long enough, you mistake them for your nature. You believe you are timid, insecure, someone who must ask permission to exist. That is the first illusion that must be shattered if you want to become superhuman in Nietzsche's sense. a being who overcomes themselves, transcends the crowd, and exceeds the limits imposed from the outside. Let me tell you a small story. There was a boy I once knew who loved to draw, spending hours every day with paper and pencil. One day, he brought a drawing to class, hoping his teacher would praise it. She glanced at it and said, "Why do you draw so strangely? You should draw like the others. A house, a tree, and the sun." With a single sentence, the boy abandoned his passion for years, not because he lacked talent, but because he was taught that difference is wrong. Nietzsche would say, that was the moment the boy's soul was bent to fit slave morality. What about you? How many times have you abandoned something that made you feel alive just because someone said, "This doesn't suit you, it's too difficult," or "People like you can't do that"? Each time, you did not just lose an opportunity. You lost a portion of your innate strength. You nailed yourself into the story of, "I am weak. I am not good enough. I can't." But the truth, as Nietzsche wanted you to see, is that you were never allowed to explore your strength enough to know how vast it really is. The weakness you carry is not biological. It is inherited. An inheritance from being taught to shrink yourself to fit the comfort of the crowd. From being punished every time you shone too brightly. From being forced to believe that obedience is virtue and self-mastery is guilt. You are weak not because you lack strength, but because that strength is buried beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and habitual self-contraction. Nietzsche called the first step toward becoming superhuman the destruction of the old value system. Not changing behavior, not acquiring new skills, but annihilating the root story. I am weak because I was born weak. He would look you in the eyes and say, "No, you are not weak. You were raised to be weak. And if you have the courage to dismantle that conditioning layer by layer, you will find that your strongest self is still there, not dead, only restrained." Ask yourself, what limits are you living under that are not truly yours? Limits of ability, of ambition, of how strong you are allowed to be. Most answers are the same. Too many. Too many limits not chosen, not tested, but inherited from society. And here is what Nietzsche wants you to do right now. Ask the question the crowd hates most, the question of the awakening individual. If I no longer believe the definitions they imposed on me, who am I really? That question is dangerous because it collapses the entire old structure. It reveals the truth. None of them ever had the right to define your strength. Now it is your turn. If you truly want to shatter this first illusion, write down in the comments the biggest limitation you were taught to believe about yourself and break it publicly right here. Let your answer be the first declaration that you are no longer living by the story the world placed upon you. Number 2, what is the ÜBERMENSCH, the axis for understanding the entire journey? But shattering illusions is not enough. Once you see the cage you were placed in, the next question immediately appears like a blade. If this is not my nature, what can I become? And it is at this precise moment that Nietzsche introduces the figure he pursued his entire life, the ÜBERMENSCH, the superhuman, the one who no longer lives by values written by others. The ÜBERMENSCH is not a superhero, not a mythological figure, not a being with supernatural power. The ÜBERMENSCH is a direction, a type of human Nietzsche believed humanity had forgotten it could become. A human who dares to create their own values, set their own laws, and live by their own will without asking permission to exist. The first pillar of the Übermensch is self-overcoming, continuously surpassing oneself. Not surpassing others, not racing society, but endlessly transcending one's previous self. Nietzsche believed the strongest person is not the one who defeats the crowd, but the one who defeats themselves each day. Someone living in the spirit of self-overcoming never accepts stagnation and never hides behind phrases like, "This is just how I am," or "I was born this way." They constantly shed old skin, like a snake that must shed its skin as it grows. If it does not, it dies. And if you do not overcome yourself, you will live a life that never touches your true essence. Consider a very ordinary example. I once knew a man, 37 years old, who spent over a decade in the same job because it was safe, even though he always wanted to build his own business. He said he was not smart enough, brave enough, or clever enough. But the truth was that he lacked nothing except one act of self-overcoming. One day, after being laid off, he had nothing left to cling to. And in that moment, he asked himself, "If I have nothing left to lose, what is stopping me from trying?" 1 year later, he had built a small but stable brand. What changed him was not luck. It was the moment he overcame the fearful man he had been protecting as a safety shell. Nietzsche would say, in that moment, he touched the spirit of the Übermensch. The second pillar of the Übermensch is value creation, creating one's own values and legislating one's own life. Nietzsche did not believe in ready-made values. For him, the strong individual dares to destroy values that have decayed and create new ones aligned with their nature. The slave lives by laws written by others. The superhuman writes their own law. This is not mindless rebellion. It is a deeper form of morality, one born from inner truth rather than social pressure. The strongest metaphor Nietzsche used for this is the child. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he described the final transformation of the spirit as becoming a child, not naive, but capable of saying yes to life, capable of creating, capable of beginning again from zero without fearing judgment. The child creates rules. The child invents games. The child defines meaning. The child does not view others as judges of its life. That is the essence of value creation. The third pillar of the Übermensch is affirmation, the courage to say yes to life, including suffering. This is where Nietzsche is most misunderstood. The Übermensch does not avoid pain. They do not flee adversity. They face it and say, "If this is part of my life, I choose to accept it and transform it into strength." The weak complain. The strong turn pain into will. Affirmation is the ability to say yes to life, even when it is brutal. When you can do that, you become unbreakable. Imagine standing before a massive mountain. Part 1 of this work was the moment you realized you were tied at the base and mistook that for destiny. But Part 2, the one you are reading now, is the moment you lift your head and finally see the summit you must aim for. You do not yet know the path. You do not yet know what you must fight, but you know the summit exists. And sometimes, simply knowing the summit is real is enough for will to awaken. The Übermensch is not perfect, not victorious in everything, not someone who never fails. The Übermensch is simply someone who refuses to live by other people's values for one more day. They do not ask permission to be themselves. They do not ask the crowd how far they are allowed to dream. They do not require applause to know their will is real. And if you feel a subtle movement awakening within you as you read this, it is not coincidence. It is the deepest part of you recognizing the form it was meant to take. The next part will show you the only foundation that turns the ÜBERMENSCH from an idea into reality: absolute responsibility. Number 3. Absolute responsibility, the foundation of the Superman. Once you have seen the summit, the figure of the ÜBERMENSCH, Nietzsche forces you to face the next question, sharper than any blade. So who is responsible for getting you there? And here, most people stop. Not because they do not want strength, but because they cannot bear the truth that everything in their life begins with them. Nietzsche insisted, "Become who you are." No one grants you power. You must forge it yourself. Strength begins when you stop blaming, not as a moral lesson, but as the first doorway to real freedom. You must understand this. No one can approach the ÜBERMENSCH while still living by familiar excuses. I am this way because of my past. I can't because of society. I wasn't lucky. These phrases are the final inheritance of slave morality, the belief that life happens to you rather than being created by you. To cross to the other side, you must abandon the victim role. You must stand upright and say the sentence the weak fear most: I am the cause, not the consequence. Absolute responsibility is not a burden. It is the first liberation. Because when you acknowledge that everything in your life is connected to you, your choices, your limits, your silence, your compromises, you also acknowledge a terrifying and beautiful truth. If you are the source of the problem, you are also the source of the power to change it. Strong individuals are not those without painful pasts. They are those who stopped using the past as an excuse. A viewer of the channel named Lena shared that she grew up poor, constantly told she was a child with no future. She studied half-heartedly, worked half-heartedly, loved half-heartedly. Everything remained at a level of mere survival, because she believed what others had told her, that her life would never improve. One day, after being passed over for promotion yet again, she heard herself repeat the sentence she had used for years. I can't do better because I was born in the wrong place. This time, the sentence sounded false. It no longer felt like truth. It felt like a story she had memorized. Months later, she enrolled in a new professional certification, transferred departments, acquired new skills, and eventually started a small business. When I asked what changed her, Lena said, I got tired of thinking my life was someone else's fault. The moment she abandoned the victim role, she was no longer the same person. Nietzsche would call that a foundational transformation, the point where the weak self collapses and the strong self begins to form. In Greek mythology, there is the story of Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods to give it to humanity. That fire was not just light, but will, creativity, and self-determination. When Zeus punished Prometheus, what he truly sought to destroy was not theft, but the message behind it. You have the right to reclaim what is yours. Nietzsche saw Prometheus as a symbol of absolute responsibility. No one forced him. No one commanded him. No one protected him. But he acted, and he paid the price, not because he was weak, but because he chose strength over safety. Do you see it? Every time you blame someone, you extinguish the Promethean fire within yourself. You voluntarily hand your power back to the world. You say, I am this way because of them. And with that single sentence, You return to your old position, passive, defined, controlled. The strong, those moving toward the ÜBERMENSCH, say the opposite. I am this way because of me. Absolute responsibility places you in the position of creator rather than victim, of cause rather than effect. And the truth is, the world respects those who take responsibility, not because they are flawless, but because they do not flee. The weak seek excuses, the strong seek causes, the weak assign blame, the strong treat everything as feedback for self-transformation. Your deepest transformation will not occur when you defeat someone else, but when you realize no one can defeat you more thoroughly than you have defeated yourself. And this is where the journey towards superhumanity truly begins. When you stop asking, "Who made me this way?" and start asking, "What will I do from here?" Absolute responsibility turns you from reactor to creator, from consequence to cause, from shaped to self-shaping. The moment you take full ownership of your life, you are no longer a victim of anything. You become the author of your next incarnation. That, according to Nietzsche, is the first real step of the Superman. If you are truly ready to step out of the victim role, write just one word in the comments. The word "a superhuman" chooses to begin again. Ownership. Write it as an oath, and let the world see that you have reclaimed your power. Number 4. The will to power, the fuel that drives self-overcoming. There comes a moment in your journey after shattering illusions, seeing the figure of the ÜBERMENSCH and taking absolute responsibility, when you must step into a deeper layer of strength, the layer of the primal force that drives human beings beyond themselves. This is no longer about insight or choice. This is where Nietzsche places the only fuel he believed truly strong humans possess: the will to power, the impulse to expand the self, to exceed old limits, to become more than one has been. If you want to understand the will to power, look at an ordinary moment that reveals its essence. I once knew a man named Rowan, 33 years old, who worked the same office job for 8 years. He did not hate it, but every time he spoke about his life, he sounded resigned. I think I'm only suited for safe things. One evening, while waiting for a bus, he noticed a boy about 10 years old practicing dance moves on a street corner. No camera, no applause, no stage. Just a child repeating the same movement until he got it right. Watching him, Rowan felt something stir. The boy had no goal except to be better than he was 5 minutes earlier. In that moment, Rowan realized what he had lost. He no longer overcame himself. He merely repeated. That is how the will to power awakens. In small moments that ignite large questions. Nietzsche would say, "When the will to power awakens, you know you are alive." Modern science interestingly echoes this. When humans face challenges, the nervous system releases dopamine, not when goals are achieved, but when progress is made. The brain is designed to reward self-overcoming, not domination over others. Nietzsche was almost prophetic here. Humans feel most alive not in safety, but in transcendence. Science merely confirms what he saw more than a century ago. The will to power is not just philosophy, it is biological structure. But society fears the will to power more than anything. It teaches you that safety is the goal, not expansion. That ambition is dangerous, difference suspicious, strength excessive. And after hearing that long enough, you believe the desire to rise is arrogance. Nietzsche would look at you and say, "No, Weakness begins when your will to power is silenced. How many times have you wanted to change, learn a new skill, ask for higher pay, leave a toxic environment, only to silence yourself with, "Later? I'm not sure. It's awkward." Each time, the will to power weakens. Not dies, but quiets. Eventually, you believe you no longer have it. But the truth is, it never left. You stopped listening. To awaken the will to power, Nietzsche did not prescribe grand gestures. He spoke of discipline, confrontation, small unseen actions repeated daily. This is why truly strong individuals are often quiet. They are busy battling their former selves. No one sees them training at dawn. No one sees them reading late after exhaustion. No one sees them abandoning old habits. But these unseen acts open doors the weak never enter. The will to power is like an underground current. Let it flow, and it pulls your body, mind, and destiny forward. Shut it down, and you live a repetitive, safe, depleted life, what Nietzsche called the life of the domesticated. One final truth must be remembered: the will to power is not a feeling. It is action. You do not wait for will to begin. You begin, and will appears. You do not wait for inspiration. You act, and inspiration follows. Nietzsche wrote, "It is not the strength, but the duration of great sentiments that makes men great." Greatness lies not in bursts, but in sustained will. This section ends with a warning. The will to power awakens the moment you act, but it disappears the moment you wait for perfection. Choose one small action you can take today, and take it. Not for visibility, but because this is how you unlock your strongest self. And once you take even one step, you will understand what Nietzsche always wanted you to know. Will is not something you possess, it is something you become. Number 5. Escaping herd morality. The strong do not seek acceptance. If the will to power is the engine that drives you beyond yourself, then the next step on the path toward becoming a superhuman in Nietzsche's sense, is the moment you sever the final cord keeping you at the level of mediocrity, herd morality. It is the value system society quietly implants to make individuals easy to control, easy to predict, and completely harmless to the existing order. Nietzsche understood this clearly. No one can become the ÜBERMENSCH while still living by rules written to keep them lying still within the crowd. Herd morality appears gentle, kind, and polite, yet it is the most refined chain modern humans wear around their necks. It does not forbid you from becoming strong. It simply teaches you to feel shame whenever you are different. It does not forbid you from dreaming big. It merely whispers, "Don't be too ambitious." It does not forbid confidence. It only warns, "Don't let people think you are arrogant." And after hearing these messages long enough, you confuse domestication with morality, shrinking with kindness, and fear with humility. Nietzsche looked at the crowd and wrote, "Morality is the herd instinct in the individual. Herd morality does not live out there. It lives inside you as a small but persistent whisper. Don't stand out. Don't leave the group. Don't make people uncomfortable." That whisper makes the strong begin to doubt themselves, while granting legitimacy to the weak. Imagine a forest filled with ancient trees, all growing upward in the same straight shape, all so similar that none truly stands out. But within that forest, there is one twisted tree, leaning in a direction no one else chose, growing along a strange trajectory, as if bent by the wind since childhood. People look at it and think it is flawed. But Nietzsche would see something else. It is precisely its deviation from the common form that reveals its own will. And those perfectly straight trees, they are merely copies of one another, strong in number, but weak in essence. Herd morality turns you into one of those straight trees, beautiful, safe, acceptable, and easily replaceable. To make this clearer, look at a famous example, a living proof of shedding herd morality. When Lady Gaga first began her career, she appeared in bizarre outfits, with a style no one dared to try, and a level of self-expression that confused the public. Many said she was too much, strange, and that she should tone it down to fit the market. Had she listened, she would have become just another ordinary pop singer among hundreds of identical faces. But Gaga understood something crucial. When you live truthfully, the crowd will resist you before they ever accept you. She did not dissolve into them. She did not ask permission to be herself. And that is precisely why she could not be replaced. The crowd does not hate strength. The crowd hates what it cannot control. When you step away from herd morality, you become unpredictable. And for Nietzsche, that is the first sign of inner freedom. But be clear, escaping herd morality does not mean opposing society. It means no longer living for society's approval. The weak live by likes, by other people's gazes, by the comfort of agreement. The strong live by inner coherence. They do not need to be understood, do not need approval, and do not require praise to move forward. They are at ease with solitude, because they know solitude is the price of keeping the self from being diluted. Nietzsche said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." And this is true. If you are not vigilant, the herd will devour you, not through violence, but through affirmation. By convincing you that normality is the goal, safety is happiness, and difference is danger. But you cannot become the ÜBERMENSCH if you still need permission to exist. Look back at your life. How many times have you altered your voice, opinions, or choices just to avoid judgment? How many times have you diminished yourself so others would not feel uncomfortable? How many times did you know exactly what was right for you, yet chose silence out of fear that your position would be shaken? That is herd morality operating through you. Escaping it is not a declaration against the world. It is standing up from the chair you have been sitting on for far too long. The strong do not seek acceptance, they seek their own truth. And if that truth leaves them standing alone, they still stand. Because Nietzsche understood something the crowd never will. Solitude is the only space where an individual can become themselves without being diluted. The moment you no longer live to be accepted, you become the most dangerous threat to any system that seeks to domesticate you. And it is precisely here that you step through another door, the door leading to the highest level of the journey toward becoming superhuman, where you not only escape the herd, but truly begin creating your own values, reconstructing the self in the way Nietzsche considered the pinnacle of life. You have left the herd. Now it is time to walk on your own legs, as a free human being, a human becoming superhuman. If what you have just heard makes you realize that you did not live small by nature, but because you were forced for too long to follow rules written to keep you identical to the crowd, press like not merely to support the video, but to mark one singular and very silent moment. The moment you realize herd morality no longer has the right to guide you. Number 6. the real-world path to becoming Übermensch, Nietzsche's only map of evolution. At this point, you have stepped out of the herd and stand alone in a territory where no one can guide you anymore. But Nietzsche understood. Breaking chains is not enough. Now you must learn how to walk, not as someone freshly liberated, but as someone who is evolving. What Nietzsche offers you is not a vague dream, but a very precise map etched into Thus Spoke Zarathustra as an oath of a soul being reborn. A map of 3 psychological forms, 3 irreversible stages that cannot be skipped: the camel, the lion, the child. This process does not merely make you stronger, it transforms you into an entirely different type of being. A superhuman in the existential sense, one who dares to transcend the old ego and step into the form life itself demands. Stage 1. The camel, bearing weight to become heavy. Nietzsche described the camel as the first being in inner evolution, the one who carries the burdens of life, responsibility, truth, discipline, vows, commitments. This is not submission, but strength in its rawest form. The camel accepts what the weak avoid. It bears, it endures, it becomes heavy. And it is precisely this heaviness that forms the foundation of true strength. In real life, this stage is not glamorous. There is no stage, no applause, no encouragement. This is when you train at 5 a.m. while no one knows. When you learn a new skill, no one praises you. When you correct yourself, habit by habit, reflex by reflex, limit by limit, knowing it is time to discard what no longer serves you. Let me tell you about a friend of mine named Evan. For 7 years, he lived like a shadow, avoiding responsibility, avoiding challenge, avoiding anything that would make him grow. One day, when life cornered him with no escape left, he chose to change. He woke at 5 a.m., trained daily, quit alcohol, quit gambling, relearned from the ground up everything he had promised himself he would do later. No one praised him, no one encouraged him, but in that silence, Evan became heavy. 1 year later, his life shifted direction, not because of luck, but because he accepted becoming a camel. Nietzsche would say, to become light, one must first become heavy. Strength always has a price, and the first price is learning how to bear it. Stage 2. The lion, destroying every law imposed upon you. But the camel cannot take you to the summit. It only knows how to carry. And when the strength within you grows too large to remain contained, a new form awakens. The lion, not to destroy the world, but to shatter the invisible chains you once bowed to. The lion realizes that the greatest enemy is not others, but the rules you have lived by for too long. Don't take risks. Don't make people uncomfortable. Just be safe. These phrases do not need threats. Repetition alone makes them feel true. But when the lion awakens, it looks at those limits wrapped in polite disguise and says for the first time, I no longer belong to this. In that moment, the old ego fractures, and the path toward real freedom begins to open. Neuroscience shows that when humans break an old behavioral pattern, the anterior cingulate cortex is immediately activated, the region responsible for processing inner conflict and restructuring identity. Meaning, every time you defy what once defined you, your brain rewrites itself. Nietzsche did not use scientific language, but he understood this essence deeply. Lives are not changed by grand actions, but by the moment one dares to say no. But the lion only completes half the work. It breaks laws. It destroys old structures. It shatters what confines you, but it does not yet know how to create. And to become superhuman, you must step into the final form where you do not merely negate the old, but create the new. Stage 3. The child, rebirth as a creator of new values. This is the most profound moment in Nietzsche's thought. When the soul has broken all its chains, it does not become a saint, does not become a reckless rebel, and does not return to its former shape. It becomes a child. A child does not ask, "What am I allowed to do?" It asks, "What do I want to create?" The child does not inherit values, it invents values. And in Nietzsche's eyes, this is not merely the final stage, but the deepest essence of the ÜBERMENSCH, the one who creates their own life. In real life, you become the child when you are strong enough to stop living by old stories, when you begin rewriting your life in your own language, when you set new laws and take absolute responsibility for them. The real application of becoming superhuman is not found in beautiful slogans, but in the choices you repeat until they become instinct. Nietzsche did not write philosophy to sound profound. He wrote so that you would live, so that you would confront yourself in your most naked form. And to live in the spirit of the ÜBERMENSCH, you begin with the first step, living by self-imposed laws, where you do not measure value by social standards, but create principles and forge discipline yourself. From there, you define strength in your own way, not as muscle or outward achievement, but as the capacity to govern the mind without being dragged by emotion or the crowd. Living this way, you will understand why Nietzsche said the strongest souls are often silent. They use energy to elevate themselves, not to seek approval. And once your footing is firm, you must face what most people never dare to confront: living without waiting for acceptance. The superhuman does not ask permission to exist. They are willing to be misunderstood and criticized, because they know the price of freedom is the loss of herd agreement. From there, you learn to live as a being with its own will, not a copy or a product of the environment. You become the creator of your own being, the one who dares to write their life instead of repeating someone else's. The final truth Nietzsche wanted you to understand is this: the ÜBERMENSCH is not a destination, but a way of being. You do not become superhuman in a single moment. You become superhuman every time you bear like the camel, roar like the lion, and create like the child, every time you choose action over permission, truth over comfort, expansion over contraction. If you are disciplined enough to maintain that rhythm, you will not need to ask who you are becoming. Life itself, in the form you have created, will answer for you. If you have come this far, you have seen what Nietzsche always wanted humanity to face. Strength does not arise in those who try to be extraordinary, but in those who dare to strip away every layer that made them ordinary. You have seen the cage, the summit, the will stirring beneath old skin. And most importantly, you have seen what the crowd avoids for a lifetime, that no one is coming to save you except yourself. The path to becoming superhuman is not a secret, but a brutal honesty with your strongest self. And when you step into that state, you will understand what Nietzsche whispered over a century ago. True power is not the roar, but the presence that forces others to confront themselves. A sovereign individual always creates disturbance, not through noise, but through the trajectory of life they deliberately choose. If this message resonates with you, share it with someone who is suffocating under expectations they never chose. And if you want to go deeper into the art of self-mastery, the will to power, and the evolutionary path of the self in Nietzsche's spirit, Press subscribe to walk with us. Because superhuman are not born. Superhuman are created from the moment you dare to begin.